In this video, I'm going to remove and refit my handlebars just to show you how to do it. The first step is to take off the grips. I've got lock-on grips just using one small T10 Torx Allen key, so I'm going to undo that and pull them off. If you have conventional grips, you need to actually try and pull those grips off, or a nice little tip is just to carefully slide something underneath the end of them, like a small screwdriver, and spray a bit of disc cleaner down there so they slide off nice and easy. Next is to remove the levers, shifters and anything else we've got on there, like this dropper post. I need to actually just undo my dropper post remote slightly so I can get to the bolt that's holding my brake levers on. Depending on the make of your brake levers, some you can actually undo the bolt and they'll just come straight off. Others you might have to slide all the way off. And in this case, see my cables are a little bit too tight. If that's the case, just leave it loose for now. And once I've got everything loose, I'll then take my bars off and I can sort of wriggle them around to get the lever off. In the case of my Shimano XTR levers, you can actually just push something small into that hole there, and that lets that clamp flip open, makes that job a little bit easier. So now to remove the bars from the stem. It's really common to have these 4 bolts and that front plate just lifts off. In more sort of old-fashioned stems, you might just have 2 that clamp the bars down. So undo those and then you might have to thread the bars out. So in this case, I'm just going to remove all 4 of these bolts and remove the bars at the front. So I've undone the bottom 2, just pull them out again, place them somewhere safe. And just now holding that front plate whilst I remove these 2, just so my bars don't fall out and smash on the floor. Don't want to get them too scratched, so the final bolt, just finger tight, loosen that off. Okay, so now all going to come off. So if you're replacing your bars, the things you need to consider are width and rise, what you'd like to use them for, basically, the type of riding you do. But also it's really important that you buy the correct clamp size bar. These are actually 35mm bars, some call them oversized, but you also get 31.8 and 25.4 that stem will fit. So you either need to buy a new stem or buy the bars that will fit your original stem. So now to fit the handlebars, make sure the clamping surface on the stem and the bars is really nice and clean. If there's any dust or mud in there, that's where you can get some creaking. And if you do have these shifters and brakes that don't come off the clamps, it's worth now thinking about threading them back onto the bars so you don't have to mess around with the gear cables or brake cables before you then mount the bars back on. In my case, I know that the clamps all come off these brakes and shifters, so I'll actually just mount the bars first. So just sit the bars into the stem and make sure you get that front plate on the right way around. It might have an up or a down. I'm not sure mine does, but it does have some writing on there, 35mm, so I'll make sure that is the correct way up. Sit it on and I'll start replacing these bolts that go on the front. It's really important that you tighten these stem bolts nice and evenly, but for now I'm just going to get them so there's a bit of friction holding the bars, they're not moving around, and the gaps on the top and the bottom of the clamp is about equal, but I'm not going to over tighten these just yet. I want to get all my controls back on first, and then I'm going to actually move my bars around, make sure they're rolled back in exactly the point I want them, but also making sure they're square in the stem. But for now, leave it kind of loose and I'll get the controls back on there. So make sure when you're putting the controls back on that you put them on in the right order. Mine go shifter, brake, grip, and that depends on how long your brake levers are and things like that, to which side of the brake you want to put the shifter on. Again, with my controls, I'm not going to tighten them up just yet. I'm going to get them slid onto the bar, but I don't want them sliding around too much. They might scratch and just mark my bars. And I'm also making sure that all the gears and all the hoses are in the sort of correct place. They're not getting wound around each other. So next is my dropper, brake, then grip. You can see my grip has actually got the Scott lockout levers mounted onto it, and it won't quite reach to get onto my bars. So if I just turn them slightly, it gives me a little bit more slack, and that'll go on there. Right, just need to squeeze my brake lever in there. A pro tip here is if you've got conventional grips, spray a little bit of hairspray inside the grip. That's going to help it slide on. And also once it's on there, it's going to help it stick. Okay, so now I'm sat on the bike. I'm actually going to loosen the stem bolts off slightly so I can get them centered absolutely right. And also check the roll on the bars. I'm actually going to roll these a bit further back. I like the sweep to be pretty nice and sort of flat on the bars. There we go, nice and centered. And now a really important part is making sure that these front bolts are tightened up really sort of equally across all four. So I'm actually checking the gap between the front plate and the stem, top and bottom, so it's the same. And also going across diagonally on the stem bolts, tightening them as I go. So I've tightened those equally, and you don't want to go too crazy with these bolts. They're only 5 Newton meters torque. And if you haven't got a torque meter, it's actually not very much at all. So it's just enough to stop the bars from spinning. So bars are set, now to work out the angles of everything else. First thing I'm going to do is butt the grips up, so make sure they're pushed all the way in and tighten them up. Next is to tighten the grips, make sure they're butted up nice and firmly on the end. And then again, these don't want to be very tight at all. They're really small bolts, these, so if you over tighten them, you can end up sort of stripping that bolt or, you know, rounding off the head. So now just to set up the brake levers, shifters and dropper post, I actually like to be sat on my saddle when I'm doing this. So I'll really sort of get the feel of the angle that I'm used to on my brake levers. That feels about right to me. Again, not very tight. This one is saying 4 to 6 Newton meters, which isn't very tight at all. So I'm just matching up the gap from the grip to the brakes on both sides, and then to get the angle, I'm going to sit back. I'm looking over the top of the bars. I can just about see the top of the brake levers. I'm making sure that my dropper remote is really close to my left thumb. I'm running a 1x gear system on this, so I don't have a left shifter from my front mech, but I do have the lockout remotes for my shock on this Scott. So it's there, nice and usable by my left thumb. Last but not least is my shifter. And I like to get that at actually sort of quite a steep angle on the bars, so that when I'm up, standing and sprinting, I can reach to shift down the block. So there you go, there's how to fit handlebars. It's a pretty simple job. Just make sure you get those stem bolts tightened equally, and also don't over tighten anything onto your bars. If you want to see more videos from GMBN, you can click up there for how to adjust your bar height, and click just down there for how to cut your handlebars if you want them slightly narrower. Click on the globe to subscribe to GMBN, it's totally free. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video.